The neon lights of Seoul's nightlife shimmered over the rain-slicked streets, casting fractured reflections across the city. At the heart of Gangnam's chaos, the Velvet Orchid pulsed with music so loud it rattled the glasses on the bar. The club was a haven for those seeking indulgence, but tonight it was more than a playground, it was a battlefield. The crime kingpin, a man whose reputation alone kept fear in the hearts of rival gangs, stood behind the bar, surveying his empire with sharp, calculating eyes. He had always believed he could control the chaos, bend it to his will, and emerge unscathed. But fate, as it often did, had other plans. The first gunshot shattered the rhythm of the night. Patrons screamed and ducked behind tables, champagne bottles flying in all directions. His instincts kicked in. He ducked behind the bar, eyes scanning for the source. And then he saw her, her dark skin gleaming under the strobes, eyes wide as terror danced across her features. The bartender, a young black woman named Amara, had been working that night without realizing the storm heading her way. Her hands moved automatically, grabbing bottles and sliding them across the counter, trying to keep control in the midst of panic. She wasn't supposed to be here. She had taken the shift at the last minute, fleeing from a small, safe apartment, thinking a night behind a bar was a refuge from her past. A bullet ricocheted off the mirrored wall behind her. In a heartbeat, it grazed her shoulder. She stumbled, gripping the edge of the bar. The kingpin didn't hesitate. He fired back, suppressing the attackers, and the room descended into chaos once more. When the smoke cleared, she was still alive, though trembling and bleeding slightly. He moved toward her, his heart oddly clenched at the sight of her. The chaos of the world outside seemed to pale beside her fragility. "You're hurt," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "I'll be fine," she said, forcing a smile, though her hand instinctively pressed against the wound. The kingpin felt a flash of anger, not at her, but at the world. This was supposed to be a controlled operation, a message to a rival gang. But she had been caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. And now, her survival would cost him dearly. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A message from his closest allies, the men who helped maintain his fragile empire. She survived. She must be dealt with, or our alliance is over. His jaw tightened. The command was simple and brutal: hand her over, or face consequences that could destroy everything he had built. He looked at Amara, her eyes meeting his. There was a silent understanding between them, a shared pulse of danger and a flicker of something more fragile, something unexpected. "No," he said. The word was final, cutting off all debate before it could start. "You can't." "They'll," one of his lieutenants started, but he silenced him with a look. "I won't hand her over. Not to be hurt. Not to protect an alliance that has already shown its teeth." The room went quiet, the energy tense, and the reality set in. By protecting her, he had painted a target on his own back. The empire he had built on fear and precision now teetered dangerously, all because of her. Amara, sensing the weight of his decision, looked at him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why risk everything for me?" He hesitated, a flicker of something unfamiliar crossing his eyes. "Because someone has to care," he admitted. The words felt strange even as he said them, foreign in a life built on power, not sentiment. She studied him for a moment, trying to decipher the man behind the reputation, the one whose empire struck fear into the hearts of many. There was more here than she expected, a depth that couldn't be measured by the violence that surrounded him. In the days that followed, Seoul itself seemed to conspire around them. The kingpin's men moved with silent efficiency, evacuating Amara from the Velvet Orchid and placing her in a secure location. It was luxurious, sterile even, but she felt the suffocating weight of fear pressing down. Yet, even in that cage of protection, the connection between them grew. Their conversations, initially brief and cautious, began to linger. He learned about her past, about her resilience and intelligence. She learned about the man behind the titles, about his unspoken regrets and the isolation that came with power. Slowly, a bond formed, fragile, improbable, and entirely real. One night, as the city outside hummed with the distant pulse of nightlife, he found her on the balcony, staring at the neon skyline. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening like wet black mirrors. "You shouldn't be out here," he said quietly, joining her. She shook her head. I need to see it. To remember that there's a world outside this chaos. A world that isn't just survival. He didn't argue. Instead, he stood beside her, their shoulders brushing lightly. The silence between them was comfortable, charged with a quiet intensity that neither dared name. Do you regret it? She asked after a long pause. He looked out at the city, his mind replaying the last days, the shootout, the decisions, the threat looming over his empire. I've made mistakes, he admitted. But protecting you, that's not one of them. Her gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to hope. Hope that in a world so broken and violent, two people could find something pure, something worth holding on to. But reality was never far. The alliance he had shattered was mobilizing, whispers of betrayal growing louder with each passing hour. He knew the next confrontation could come at any time. And when it did, he would be forced to choose again between the empire he had built and the woman who had already claimed a piece of his heart. Yet, as he stood there beside her, the city alive below them, he felt a determination he had never known before. She had survived the bullet that was meant to end her life. And somehow, in the chaos that followed, she had survived him too, had survived the world he ruled, with all its danger and violence. And in protecting her, he found a sliver of redemption, a flicker of humanity he had long buried. He didn't know how long it would last, or how much it would cost him. But for the first time in a long while, he felt alive, not just as a kingpin, but as a man capable of something more. As the first hints of dawn touched the skyline, he made a silent promise. Come what may, he would not let her go. Not for alliances, not for power, not even for himself. And in that promise, a seed of love began to grow, a love forged in bullets, chaos, and defiance, but genuine nonetheless. The city never slept, but tonight, Seoul seemed quieter, as if holding its breath in anticipation. Inside a hidden safehouse tucked away in one of Gangnam's quieter districts, the kingpin paced, his mind a storm of calculations and possibilities. He had always thrived on control, but now, control was slipping through his fingers like grains of sand. Amara moved quietly around the room, tending to the small comforts she could find, straightening a vase, checking the lock on the door, arranging the few belongings she had brought with her. Despite the circumstances, she carried herself with an unshakable calm, a resilience born from years of navigating a world that often tried to erase her. He stopped pacing and watched her. There was something mesmerizing about the way she moved, deliberate yet effortless, as if she were both part of the world and apart from it at the same time. A strange thought struck him. In a life filled with danger, betrayal, and power struggles, she was the one thing he couldn't dominate or manipulate. And that realization unsettled him more than any rival gang ever had. "You're quiet," she said softly, glancing at him. Her eyes, dark and reflective, seemed to pierce through the armor he had built around himself. "I'm calculating," he replied. "There are people out there who would kill me for what I did tonight." She nodded, understanding more than she let on. "And yet you didn't hesitate." He exhaled sharply. "Some things are worth more than alliances or power." His voice was low, almost confessional. "Some people." Her gaze lingered on him, searching for meaning in those words. For the first time since their meeting, she allowed herself a fleeting sense of trust, fragile but real. Hours passed, each filled with quiet conversation and careful planning. He briefed his most loyal lieutenants in whispers, discussing strategies to counter the inevitable backlash from the rival gang. Every plan he laid out was meticulous, designed to protect Amara above all else. She listened, absorbing the gravity of his world, but also sensing the weight it placed on him. "You carry all this on your shoulders," she said gently. "It's a lot." He shrugged, though his jaw tightened. "It's my life. My choices." "You don't have to do it alone," she said. "You have people who care about you. And you have me, whether you want it or not." The words caught him off guard. He wasn't used to anyone speaking to him like that, so honestly, so without fear. His empire had made him untouchable in one sense, but in another, it had isolated him entirely. Her presence challenged that isolation in a way he couldn't ignore. The next morning, the first signs of trouble arrived. A messenger from the rival gang slipped through the cracks of the city, delivering a warning. Hand her over, or the fragile truce would shatter. But he refused. Again. They want her, one of his lieutenants said cautiously, trying to gauge his reaction. I know, he said. His eyes were steely, unwavering. And I will not give her to them. Do you understand? The room was silent, the weight of his decision pressing down on everyone present. Protecting her was no longer just a matter of personal choice, it was a declaration of war. Over the next few days, tension mounted. His men moved through the city like shadows, securing safe houses, scouting exits, and watching for any sign of intrusion. Amara stayed close, learning the rhythms of this hidden world. Despite the danger, she began to feel an unusual sense of belonging, not to the Empire, but to the man who had chosen her over everything else. One evening, after a particularly tense day of surveillance and strategy meetings, they found themselves alone on the rooftop of the safe house. The city sprawled beneath them, lights twinkling like distant stars. You think about them all the time, she observed, nodding toward the neon-lit streets below. All the enemies, the alliances, the betrayals. He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. It's hard not to. This life doesn't forgive mistakes. But you made one, she said softly, and you're facing the consequences. That's something. That's brave. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw more than fear or curiosity in her eyes. There was admiration, respect, and something tender that made his chest tighten. I didn't do it for bravery, he admitted. I did it because you mattered. Her hand brushed against his, tentative at first, then firmer. The contact was electric, not in a flashy, dramatic way, but in a steady, undeniable current that grounded them both amidst the chaos surrounding them. I'm glad, she said quietly, her voice carrying an honesty that pierced through the tension around them. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm glad you chose me. Their time together was brief before reality intruded again. Gunshots echoed through the streets, signaling the arrival of the rival gang. His men scrambled into action, barricading the safe house, checking for vulnerabilities. Adrenaline surged, but he felt the familiar tug of fear, not for himself, but for her. He grabbed her arm gently. Stay close, he instructed. No matter what happens, stay close to me. She nodded, trusting him completely, and together they navigated the chaos inside the safe house. Bullets shattered windows, walls trembled under the force of gunfire, and the distant wail of sirens marked the approach of authorities who were unwittingly stepping into a war zone. When the gunfire finally ceased, they found themselves shaken but unscathed. The rival gang had retreated, for now, but the message was clear: their next encounter would not be so forgiving. In the quiet aftermath, he found her sitting on the edge of a couch, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. He knelt beside her, brushing his thumb against her hand. You're safe, he said. For now. She looked at him with a mixture of relief and concern. And if they come back? Then we'll face them, he said firmly. Together. Her lips curved into a small smile, a fragile beam of light in the darkness. And in that moment, amidst the rubble and tension, they both felt the bond that had begun to grow between them, something forged in bullets and chaos, yet stronger than either could have anticipated. As night fell again over Seoul, the city beneath them shimmered with life, indifferent to their struggles. Yet, on the rooftop, two people found a quiet reprieve, holding on to each other against a world determined to tear them apart. And somewhere deep inside, the Kingpin realized that no empire, no alliance, no power could matter more than the life and heart of the woman who had survived the bullet, and who had, unknowingly, claimed a part of his own. The days that followed were a careful dance between vigilance and fleeting moments of calm. Seoul's streets thrummed with life, oblivious to the war unfolding in its shadows. The Kingpin's empire, once unchallenged, now creaked under the pressure of loyalty divided and alliances broken. But through it all, Amara remained at his side, a quiet anchor in a world spinning toward chaos. One evening, as rain fell in steady sheets, they returned to the Velvet Orchid, his domain, now scarred from the recent shootout. The nightclub was eerily empty, its neon lights flickering like wounded fireflies. He moved through the room slowly, inspecting damage, listening for any whispers of betrayal. Amara followed close behind, her hand brushing against his as they walked. It was a touch filled with unspoken reassurance, a silent promise that neither of them would face what came next alone. "We'll need to repair more than just the building," he muttered, surveying shattered glass and overturned tables. "I can help," she said softly. "Even if it's just making it feel like it belongs to someone again." He glanced at her, a small smile breaking through the tension. "You've already given me more than you know." Their reunion was interrupted by a low, warning buzz from his phone. A single message, typed in the cold, precise language of threats. "You chose wrong. The next bullet won't miss." He read it, jaw tightening, before turning to her. "They're coming," he said. Not a question, not a warning, just a statement of fact. Amara nodded. "Then we face them together, like you promised." The night that followed was a blur of strategy and stealth. His men moved with precision, fortifying escape routes, securing backup, and preparing for the inevitable clash. He never let her out of his sight, guiding her through the corridors of his empire as if she were the most precious object he had ever owned, and perhaps she was. When the rival gang finally arrived, it wasn't in the shadows but boldly, attempting to reclaim the dominance he had defied. The confrontation was violent but brief. His men were loyal, trained, and fiercely protective. Every corner of the Velvet Orchid became a battleground, yet he fought not just for territory, but for the life he had promised to protect. Amara stayed close, hidden behind barricades, clutching a small flashlight and helping wherever she could. It wasn't the battlefield she had imagined when she first stepped into the nightclub months ago, but somehow she felt empowered, not as a victim, but as a participant in shaping the life they now shared. At the peak of the chaos, he found himself facing the leader of the rival gang. Time seemed to slow, the room narrowing around them, and yet his eyes strayed briefly toward Amara. She watched from a distance, a silent encouragement, and it gave him a clarity he had not expected. "I won't let you take her," he said, voice low but unwavering. The words carried more weight than any gunshot, more power than any threat. The rival sneered, but the hesitation was enough. Loyalty and fear ran deeper than ambition, and soon the enemy began to retreat. The battle was over, at least for now, and though the nightclub bore the scars of conflict, the victory was undeniable. After the dust settled, he found Amara leaning against the bar, exhausted but safe. He approached, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "You okay?" he asked, almost afraid of the answer. She nodded, her smile tired but genuine. "Better than okay. I'm alive. I'm here with you." He pulled her close, their foreheads touching briefly, a shared heartbeat in the quiet aftermath. "I promised you. No one would hurt you. And you kept that promise," she said softly. "Even when it meant defying everything you built, everything you are." He shook his head, a faint laugh escaping. "I've built a lot of things, Amara. Empires. Alliances. Fear. But none of it matters if you're not safe." Her hand found his, gripping it with a gentle insistence. "Then let's start building something that matters. Together." For the first time in his life, he allowed himself to imagine a future beyond the violence, beyond the blood and power struggles. He imagined mornings with her, simple conversations over coffee instead of orders over gunfire. He imagined laughter instead of tension, and a life where he was more than a kingpin, where he was simply a man, loving and being loved. Days turned into weeks, and the shadow of the rival gang receded, though never entirely gone. He continued to run his empire with caution, but his priorities had shifted. Protecting Amara was no longer a choice, it was the reason he chose to exist the way he did. One quiet night, they found themselves on the rooftop again, the city lights glimmering below. The air was cool, and the world seemed, for a moment, to pause. "You know," she said, leaning against him, "I didn't think I'd ever feel safe in a place like this. Not here. Not with anyone." He pressed a kiss to her temple, a gentle affirmation. "Then let me be the exception. Let me be the one thing you don't have to fear." She smiled, her eyes closing in trust. "You already are." In that moment, amidst the neon glow of a city that had once been indifferent to their lives, they found something enduring, a bond forged in chaos, sealed in courage, and strengthened by the love that had grown quietly, persistently, against all odds. The Empire would continue to demand loyalty, to threaten, to test them. But as long as they faced it together, no bullet, no betrayal, no force could break the connection that had taken root between them. And as dawn painted the skyline in shades of gold and pink, he held her hand firmly, silently vowing that whatever the world demanded, whatever danger came, they would face it together. For the first time, he understood that love, unexpected, improbable, and raw, could be more powerful than fear. More powerful than bullets. More powerful than empires. And in Amara's eyes, he found the proof that surviving the storm together was only the beginning.